Joining us now on Practical 365 is Microsoft's Greg Taylor. Hello, Greg, and welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Great to be here.
So, for those that don't know you, do you want to tell us a little bit about what you do at Microsoft?
Sure. I'm a product manager in Microsoft 365 core engineering, which is basically the word substrate comes up occasionally, but it's the fundamental platform on which services like Exchange, SharePoint, Teams, and many other things are built. I work in that core engineering team, mainly been focused on Exchange over the years with a bit of a focus on security too.
Yeah. So, the substrate, is that what people sometimes say when they're on about shards? I'm not sure I say that right.
Yeah, sure.
On about
shards are the new mailbox.
Yeah,
shards are the new mailbox or the storage container. There's a lot more in your mailbox than just email these days.
Yeah.
So shard. So the term shard is typically kind of used because there's a lot of other additional information and content, whether it's configuration or app content that exists for every single user. So calling it a mailbox when it's not mail always jarred a little. So I guess we call them shards now.
So the substrate is what in part encompasses what's Exchange and other services, maybe Outlook.com, but
the substrate is data. It's very hard to describe in sort of short abstract terms, but essentially think of the substrate as that's your data or your organization's data, and then how you get to it, the client app or whatever is kind of the thing. But we tend not to think of workload strangely anymore in sort of vertical terms like products like we used to, because so much of the data is pretty much commingled at the sort of substrate level, if you like.
It's a good case when you're reading things in the press for why Microsoft services are all bundled together, because they all depend upon a common substrate.
Yeah, very much.
And that includes Exchange, obviously, as a workload then on top of it of sorts. And the last time we spoke, we were talking about killing off legacy authentication protocols to Exchange, in part or in whole, I think. How did that go?
We're done. We did it.
Yeah.
It went great. Okay, it might not have gone great if you were the person whose app got cut off at some certain point, and possibly it did.
Yeah.
But statistically speaking, it was hugely successful. Very happy with the outcome. Took us a while, but anything when you have a platform with millions and millions of users takes a while. But our customers and IT admins and everybody and developers too, they all did their bit, and I had the chance to prove it.
Yeah.
And Basic Auth no longer enabled in Exchange Online.
So that's something that almost seems an impossibility for almost anybody that's ever tried to go on a call with any vendor, who always appears surprised that that Exchange Online exists, let alone that it might have changes. So that's got to be one of many big achievements. So what does that mean? Is this Exchange done for you? Because I know a lot of people aren't starting careers in Exchange now, are they?
Right. No. Not specifically like it used to be. In the days of architecting and building Exchange, they're not entirely gone. I mean, there are still absolutely companies running Exchange on-prem, and those skills are most definitely still needed for that.
Yeah.
But if all your mailboxes has moved to the cloud, there's a different set of skills you need. But Exchange is still, the commercial world's email platform of choice. Basic Auth might be turned off, but this is just one tiny part of what this service is. And some people said, Basic Auth would never get turned off. And so, to be able to say, I told you so is awesome. But there are other things too. And part of building and managing and running a huge platform like this is figuring out what you can do to help you innovate. And part of that is what else, what are the other legacy technologies as the platform all up, Substrate, M365, and all of these things all up continue to evolve and grow. um, if you're limited the speed at which you can innovate by the slowest, horse in the race, right? Basic auth, other legacy technologies, then it sort of slows you down. So yeah, there's still plenty of work in Exchange for
So,
some of
so
them.
you're going to be quite busy then doing Exchange stuff. So where does your where is it focusing on getting rid of old stuff so you can innovate, or beginning some of
Yeah,
those new things?
well, but a bit of both. Yeah, I mean, there's certainly, like I said, I mean, there's certainly, you know, um, legacy technologies, protocols, all of these things that still exist in Exchange, which having to maintain them is expensive and troublesome
Yeah,
for us and slows us down. But the way the platform's evolving with and the I'll mention those two letters, AI, and all of these other things that are coming in too, right? Means that I think it's really interesting times at the moment. There's
yeah.
a lot changing. There's a lot going on.
So lots for you to do. But if you are uh, an ex-Exchange admin, or still an Exchange admin,
Hmm.
or you've come from another technology, you've been migrating to the cloud, you're getting there, and now you've got almost a world of opportunities ahead of you,
Right.
because most people that I speak to on the customer side will perhaps say they have a background in infrastructure, storage, compute, and they'll be looking at all various different parts of the cloud, and especially after migrating, wondering, well, what's my 5 year plan for my career, and
Hmm.
what do I start on next? What are the things that once I start to perhaps remove the underpinnings of AD and all this sort of stuff, what should I be
Hmm.
after in terms of things to do? Is it focus more on Exchange and the innovations coming, or something else?
Well, I mean, I think there's a few areas. I'm not going to take the obvious right now. Hey, everyone should go work on AI. I'm not only because
Yeah,
I think it's early days, right? I mentioned it, right? But clearly there's that. But let's focus more on um, what's available today in some sense, and what, at least in my opinion, has been an area I've encouraged and pushed people to work on over the last few years, which is security, identity, compliance. You know, um, I mean, there's been over the last few years, Exchange has not had a very fun time from a security perspective, particularly in our on-prem world, right? And so the whole driver for me turning off, or us turning off basic auth, was security, right? It was without a doubt probably the most obvious way attackers would get access to your data and your accounts, and so we had to turn that off. But it is security is a huge investment area. um, I think there's plenty of opportunities to develop skills and careers in that area for one, for
yeah.
sure. And the identity is not far off. If you've got the brain for like compliance, there's always going to be tons of work in that space. But I've always found that a little hard to wrap my head around, to be honest.
And you need to deal with lots and lots of different people and wait a long time to do things sometimes.
And some people like that, and that's all great and everything. But so it's each to your own. I always had a slight fascination with kind of client connectivity, and which kind of led me into a security kind of area,
Yeah,
because allowing people to get access to their emails securely from some mobile device or wherever they are, I don't know, just kind of appealed to me. I found that kind of interesting.
yeah,
So it was the combination of kind of email platform plus security client connectivity. That's kind of where I've always found a little bit of interest.
yeah,
But security all up is just a growing section of,
yeah. And
there's a lot
I
going on.
suppose there's a lot where if you focus on Microsoft 365, then well, both compliance and security, the Defender suite then
Hmm.
leads you into expertise in areas of Azure as well, doesn't it?
Oh, for
Yeah,
sure. Yeah, absolutely. I'm quite siloed. Some of us are quite siloed at Microsoft, depending on kind of what your, backgrounds are. I've just sort of very much stayed in the world of Exchange for a number of
yeah,
years. But, I also, that doesn't mean that's the only thing I do, because I'm part of the graph team
yeah,
really these days. I'm kind of doing a lot of work in figuring out, Graph API and how that interacts with all of our different workloads, and how developers and IT pros can use it. So Graph's another great area to really dig into, because that's the direction, certainly from an API perspective,
Yeah.
that we're taking, rather than having Exchange APIs and, you know, workload specific APIs. Graph is really where we're looking to move everything if we can.
So building automation, all of that sort of stuff, then against the Graph API. And I suppose when we think about compliance, you could think of one thing, for example, like DLP, which originated in Exchange, and things like sensitivity or sensitive information types. That those extend all the way through to Azure now, and the desktop and the endpoint as well. So it's
Exchange. A lot of those technologies that are used, you know, so many, they all came from Exchange.
yeah. So,
I mean,
so that knowledge.
when you think about it, there's an awful lot of stuff invented for email and Exchange that has become ubiquitous in the industry that we're in, and are being applied to many other workloads. So it's always been kind of interesting to see how things have evolved for me.
So you're going to be speaking in Atlanta at Tech in just a few weeks' time.
Yes.
Well, what can people expect from your session that you're doing with Tony Redmond? The big pit in the big peach as the Microsoft Cloud killed on-premises servers.
Well, I mean, anything. So I love hanging out with Tony and arguing with Tony, and in a respectful, friendly kind of way, and sometimes not. It all depends how much red wine Tony has had. But you know, he and I, we kind of did this back at Ignite a few years ago as well, where we were debating kind of benefits of cloud versus on-prem and that good stuff, right? And that was kind of fun. And this is a revision, really, of that. Things have moved on. Doesn't mean there's no on-prem anymore. There most certainly still is. And anyone who says there isn't, you know, they probably work for one of the cloud providers like Microsoft, for example, and they pretend on-prem doesn't exist. Well, I'm not one of the people who pretend it doesn't exist. But clearly, we're in a different position than we were a few years ago. Tony and I are going to figure out, we're going to debate not just like whether you should be on-prem or in cloud. That's not really necessarily the only point here, but how do you maintain security, operational excellence, what those challenges are. I mean, I mentioned security earlier, right? Exchange on-prem admins have had security issues to deal with a lot over the last few years. We take care of that in the cloud. Now, you know, let's discuss that, right? Is that a good thing, or is it a bad thing because it's something of a black box and you don't really know what's going on because your cloud solution provider doesn't tell you? So I think it's not a question of which is better, cloud or on-prem. I think it's a question of pros and cons of both. Let's get into that. We'll do it with a bit of fun, knowing Tony and I. I'm sure he'll get his temperature or his pulse will rise. You know, it's always fun to watch Tony get a little hot under the collar and tell me I'm wrong, blah, blah, blah. But ultimately, I'll win, I think is really the point, Steve, right? It doesn't really matter what the debate is.
Well, when I chat to Tony, that's the same question, and we'll see what he says.
Oh, did you?
Well, we will.
Did he say? Did he say I was going to win?
No,
as
not
well?
yet. Not yet. I'm speaking to him soon.
Oh,
so he'll be on the next podcast.
Oh, great!
Thank you very much for joining me today, and it was great to catch up with you. And I'm sure everybody that sees you at Tech is going to be in for quite an interesting session by the end of it.
That'd be fun. I mean, you know, these things are always fun, and I think, you know, it's good fun to debate. Tony's great. He's got a ton of experience, and Tony's been around forever, right? You know.
We'll cut this bit.
And yeah, don't tell him I said that. And when I win, Tony can that'll be fine. But no, it'll be fun. I'm looking forward to meeting a whole bunch of people. You know, feel free to come and say hello, and I'd love to hear kind of what your history and background and stories are. And yeah, it sounds like it's going to be fun.
Cheers. Thanks very much for joining us.
You're welcome.